Who invented noodles? The 4,000-year mystery behind one of the world's favorite foods. What if I told you that one of the world's most popular foods may have survived for more than 4,000 years, buried beneath the ground? No restaurant. No factory. No instant noodles. Just a simple bowl of dough, water, and an idea that would eventually spread across the planet. Today, noodles are everywhere. Ramen in Japan. Spaghetti in Italy. Chow mein in China. Pho noodles in Vietnam. Udon, soba, glass noodles, egg noodles. Almost every culture seems to have its own version. But that raises a surprisingly difficult question. Who invented noodles? Was it China? Italy? The Middle East? Or did different civilizations invent them independently? For a long time, nobody knew the answer. Then, in the year 2005, archaeologists made a discovery that seemed to solve the mystery. At an archaeological site called Lajia, in northwestern China, researchers found something extraordinary. Buried beneath layers of soil was a bowl containing a tangled mass of thin yellow noodles. They were about 4,000 years old. The noodles had survived because a massive earthquake and flood had buried the settlement, preserving the bowl beneath the earth. Imagine that. Someone had prepared a bowl of noodles more than 4 millennia ago, ate it, or perhaps never got the chance. And then an entire moment of their life disappeared beneath the ground. Thousands of years later, archaeologists uncovered it. And suddenly, the oldest known noodles in the world were staring back at us. But there was something even more interesting about them. The noodles were made from millet, not wheat. That tiny detail matters because it tells us something important about early noodle making. Noodles didn't necessarily begin with the wheat-based dough we associate with them today. Ancient people were experimenting with whatever grains grew in their environment. They could grind grains into flour, mix that flour with water, knead the dough, stretch or cut it, and create something completely different from ordinary bread or porridge. And that may have been the real breakthrough. Instead of simply cooking grain, humans learned to transform it. But here's where the story gets complicated. Finding 4,000-year-old noodles in China doesn't automatically prove that China invented noodles. It only proves that people in China were making noodles at least 4,000 years ago. And somewhere else in the ancient world, other people may have been doing something remarkably similar. So if China wasn't necessarily the beginning, where did noodles really come from? To understand the mystery, we need to look at what makes a noodle a noodle. At its simplest, a noodle is a prepared strip, strand, or thread of dough that is cooked in water or another liquid. That sounds incredibly basic. And that's exactly why the invention may have happened more than once. Humans in different parts of the world independently discovered that grains could be turned into dough, and dough could be shaped into long pieces before being cooked. The idea doesn't require advanced technology. You need grain. You need water. You need hands. And you need fire. That's it. So the question, who invented noodles, may actually be harder than asking who invented the wheel. Because there may never have been a single inventor. But the ancient Chinese evidence remains extraordinary. The Lajia noodles were long, thin, and remarkably similar in appearance to noodles people eat today. And their discovery changed the history of noodles. Before 2005, some historians had suggested that noodles might have originated much later, perhaps spreading into China from the West. But the Lajia discovery pushed the evidence back thousands of years. And there was another clue. Ancient Chinese texts contain references to foods made from dough, although it is often difficult to know exactly what those foods looked like. Over time, noodle making became deeply embedded in Chinese cuisine. Different regions developed different techniques. Some noodles were pulled by hand. Others were cut. Some were stretched. Some were dried for storage. And eventually, noodles became one of the most versatile foods on Earth. But China wasn't alone. Across Central Asia and the Middle East, people had been working with wheat for thousands of years. Wheat could be turned into durable dough and transported over long distances. That made it perfect for developing new forms of food. And eventually, those traditions reached the Mediterranean. Which brings us to one of the biggest myths in food history. Marco Polo and spaghetti. You may have heard the story before. According to the popular legend, Marco Polo traveled to China in the 13th century, discovered noodles, brought the idea back to Italy, and that's how pasta was born. It's a fantastic story. But there's one major problem. It's almost certainly not true. Evidence shows that Italians were eating forms of pasta before Marco Polo returned from Asia. Documents from medieval Italy describe pasta-like foods, and archaeological evidence suggests that pasta traditions in the Mediterranean have much older roots. So Marco Polo probably didn't bring noodles to Italy. But that doesn't mean there was no connection between Asian noodles and European pasta. It simply means the real story is far more complicated. One possibility is that different noodle and pasta traditions developed independently. Another is that ideas about making dough-based foods traveled gradually across trade routes connecting Asia, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. The truth may be a combination of both, because humans are remarkably good at taking a simple food idea and reinventing it. In China, noodles could be pulled into long strands. In Central Asia, dough could be shaped and cooked in different ways. In the Middle East, wheat-based foods developed into their own traditions. And in Italy, pasta eventually became an entire culinary universe. Different ingredients, different shapes, different techniques. But the same basic idea: turn dough into something long, cook it, and make it easy to eat. And then noodles underwent another transformation. They became incredibly convenient. Dried noodles could be stored for long periods. They were lightweight. They could be transported. And when needed, they could be cooked quickly. That made noodles especially valuable for travelers, soldiers, workers, and ordinary families. But perhaps no version of noodles demonstrates this better than instant noodles. In 1958, a Japanese inventor named Momofuku Ando introduced the world's first successful instant ramen, known as chicken ramen. Ando had noticed something important. People wanted food that was cheap, filling, and fast. So he developed a method of frying cooked noodles in oil, removing their moisture and creating tiny spaces inside the noodles. When hot water was added later, the noodles could rehydrate quickly. A meal that once required cooking could now be ready in minutes. The invention became a global phenomenon. Today, billions of servings of instant noodles are consumed every year. Think about how strange that journey is. A food that may have begun with ancient farmers shaping grain dough by hand eventually became something people could prepare with a kettle in a few minutes. But there is one final mystery. If noodles existed thousands of years ago, why did humans keep making them? Why didn't noodles disappear like countless other ancient foods? The answer may be hidden in their simplicity. Noodles are cheap. They're portable. They're easy to store. They're easy to combine with almost anything. Meat, vegetables, broth, eggs, spices, sauce. Even today, you can take the same basic noodle and create completely different dishes depending on where you are in the world. And that may be the real secret behind their survival. So, who invented noodles? The honest answer is, we don't know. The oldest physical noodles we've discovered so far were found in China and date back roughly 4,000 years. But that doesn't necessarily mean one person invented noodles there. There may have been earlier noodles that simply didn't survive. Other civilizations may also have created similar foods independently. And the people who first made noodles probably never thought they were inventing something that would change the world. They were simply trying to make food. They took grain. They added water. They made dough. They shaped it. They cooked it. And somehow, that simple idea survived thousands of years. From ancient Chinese kitchens, to Central Asian trade routes, to Mediterranean pasta, to Japanese ramen, to instant noodles eaten in dorm rooms and late-night kitchens around the world, the basic concept kept evolving. And perhaps that's what makes noodles so fascinating. They don't belong to just one country. They belong to humanity. The Chinese have their noodles. The Japanese have ramen, udon, and soba. The Vietnamese have pho and countless other noodle dishes. Koreans have their own noodle traditions. Italians have pasta. And dozens of other cultures have developed their own versions. Different names, different shapes, different flavors. But underneath all of them is the same ancient human idea: turn simple grain into something more. And remember that 4,000-year-old bowl discovered at Lajia? Those noodles were made by people who lived thousands of years before modern restaurants, supermarkets, or instant food existed. They had no idea that their meal would one day become part of a global food culture. They couldn't have imagined ramen shops in Tokyo, spaghetti restaurants in Rome, or instant noodles being eaten on the other side of the planet. Yet here we are, 4,000 years later, still making noodles. Still stretching them. Still cutting them. Still boiling them. Still arguing about which version tastes best. So, maybe the real question isn't, who invented noodles? Maybe it's, how did such a simple idea survive for 4,000 years? And perhaps the answer is beautifully simple. Because humans have always loved food that is cheap, versatile, comforting, and delicious. The people who made the first noodles didn't know they were creating history. They were simply making dinner. And sometimes, that's how the greatest food inventions begin.